I just wanted to welcome everybody to Redline 13 webinar number one, getting started with performance testing with the author behind the blog testingdiaries.com, Maharshi Shah. Maharshi, just wanted to first thank you for putting time into your blog, testingdiaries.com. It's really great technical content and valuable to so many people in the community. So really just wanted to say thank you for that. And then maybe we could start off with a little introduction about yourself and how you got started in testing.
Hey, good morning, Rich, and thank you for the appreciation. And first of all, I'd like to say hi to everybody, and I welcome you all to this webinar. We're getting started with performance testing. So I'm Marshi Shah, and I'm right now located in Pune, which is in India. And I have around 8 years of an experience in software testing field. And during these 8 years, I have worked on a lot of performance testing projects. And so I started my software testing career in 2008, right after I completed my Bachelor's of Engineering. And I'm pretty much enjoying working in this field very much.
Great. And so, how do you actually have time to do the blog? What company does your company give you time to do it yourself, or how have you found time to make it happen?
For the actual blogging part, let me tell you how I started testing diaries actually. So I was looking for an online all-in-one resource for software testing stuff where I can find information about performance, automation, mobile, and manual testing, which primarily for what was I was working on. And I mean basically all the aspects of software testing I was hoping to find on the internet. But I found this all stuff in bits and pieces everywhere. So instead of grabbing, I decided to create one all-in-one resource so that I can have software testers out there. So at Testing Diaries, I try to share with the community whatever I have learned while working on my projects. And I don't get much time to update my blog, but I usually write my blogs during my free time. I actually take notes of any interesting things that I find while walking, and then try to make it comprehensive for our software testing communities as much as possible. And I must say that at this point, the blogging has also become my passion along with the software testing.
Oh, that's great. Um, and through your experiences and also with the company you're at, you talk to a lot of different people about performance testing. Um, and for us, it's always a no-brainer, right? Because we see it so many times in action. But how do you explain to different customers and different people you talk to what's the value of performance testing? How do you convince them?
Okay, that's actually a very good question, actually. And I believe that performance testing is one of the most overlooked aspects of the entire software development lifecycle. And I have seen a lack of enthusiasm for the performance testing. Well, until those pestle performance issues comes back biting to us. But yeah, here's how I would tell them the importance of performance testing.
Yeah.
Uh, Yep. So here, so this
So
is
what
the,
are
yeah, so this is the screenshot of news published the day after a Black Friday. I mean, as all of you know, that the Black Friday is the most important shopping season of the year for online retailers, as lot of people buy goods online. So these retailers expect to cash in on this opportunity by selling various goods at really cheap prices, and for that they have their inventory piled up, all the supply chain on top here, and last thing they want to have is their site going down due to a high number of users coming to their site, as shown in the screenshot here. So according to me, such incidents, not only results in considerably financial losses for the companies, but it also creates a negative impression about their business in consumers' mind. So and we obviously don't want that to happen with our application, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's why the performance testing is important. And in that, you verify that your application is ready to meet the high number of users load. Oh, and while you are at it, you also need to make sure that your application performs reasonably well and considerably well under heavy load. And here are some statistics to base that fact actually. These stats are taken from a study performed by, and as you can see here, like how users are getting more and more impatient with the page load speed. And you can see, oh, and you can see the 1 second page delay could cost around $2.5 million loss to an e-commerce company just because there is a delay of 1 second. So at the outset, I mean, the e-commerce is, I mean, one of the worst hit sectors due to performance issues. And so all these statistics and users' expectations makes performance testing one of the most important activities of SDLC. And while the world is going more and more mobile nowadays, users expect your page to load really faster.
Yeah, I mean, and I personally have seen this many times in the dollar value and the business value of doing performance testing and the things that customers get out of it. And I think the statistic that's probably not captured on here is the also the negative impact for brands and for other folks when they don't do it or they get caught in a spike or something like that causes them performance issues.
Yes,
So
yes.
maybe classify a little bit for us. Performance testing is a must when when should folks use it?
Okay, yeah. So now, as I said before, like performance testing is one of the most overlooked aspects of project development right now. But it's a must when you are expecting your application to have, let's say, I mean, large number of users. When your application has large volume of data, I mean, be it database tables or DB records or HTTP or basically anything that may cause the performance issues. So, I mean, you should do it if you feel that your application is sluggish as well. And if your application is expecting high load and your application has large volume of data. And you have to do it if your customer explicitly comes back to you saying that I want a performance testing done.
Yeah, I always like that one when a customer requests it, right? Because at least you know that they understand the value of it and they're beginning to see that, hey, we need this as part of our project. And maybe with that, talk us through a little bit about a real world project for yourself, something that you've walked through and an example of a real performance testing project.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, here I have listed some requirements for which we were told to do performance testing in our project. Well, at this point, these are actually pretty vague ones at the moment, but these are actually a subset of requirements that we got for our project. And for that, we had to do the performance testing of homepage, login, search feature, view and edit profile, article listing and article details, and the logout feature. And we had a goal that the system should be able to support 4,000 concurrent users with response time no greater than 5 seconds. And we should consider the performance test as pass if there are no errors or minimal errors. And for the minimal errors, it was 0.25% in my case. So this was a real world scenario that I can relate to from the client's point of view.
Yeah, very good example. There are so many different scenarios for performance testing. I've heard cases where, even for Redline, part of how we started was somebody wanted to do or run sign up wanting to get to 50,000 users registering in 10 minutes. Other folks have requirements of sub 200 milliseconds. So there's so many different use cases out there. And as part of that, there's even different definitions within load testing, performance testing, so many different subcategories. Maybe you can also go through what is performance testing? What are the different types, or how do you define it for yourself?
Well, as per me, performance testing is non-functional testing. In performance testing, you don't check the functional aspects of your application, and you don't check, field validations or whether user is able to log in successfully or user is able to search. So you don't all test all the scenarios. And all you check by performance testing is how your application behaves when it is subjected to the certain amount of users, and by certain amount of users use it. Like you have to check how it behaves, whether it crashes, whether an error is noticed, or whether it takes a lot of time to load. So yeah, performance testing is a non-functional testing, just like security testing that we do in our project. Yeah. Okay, so now as I have observed many times, people use performance testing terminologies interchangeably. So they often gets confused by different terms such as means performance testing, load testing, stress testing, and they believe that all these are same. But well, that's not the case actually. Performance testing, that is done is to validate the speed, scalability, and stability of your application. Whereas in load testing, what you do is you check the application's response time, throughput, etc., and capture various important metrics. Under the normal and peak load applied on your application, and then there is stress testing. In which you put your application in under the extreme load with an intent to actually break that particular system and reveal some bugs that may surface only when it comes under when your application comes under the high load conditions. And yeah, apart from these three terms, I would like to specially mention some of terms like volume testing, spike testing, and endurance testing. So basically, in volume testing, what we have to do is we have to test software when it is subjected to huge volume of data. Huge number of database records, huge number of requests. So and check how it behaves. And then there is spike testing, which is done to ensure that the application is able to handle such sudden surge and requests, just like we saw in the Black Friday incident.
Yeah.
So in that case, we have to make sure that the application is behaving fine using the spike testing. And on the other hand, we have endurance testing, which is where we subject our application to significant amount of load over a longer duration of time. So yeah, we occasionally may need to do all this testing, apart from the usual performance testing, load testing, and stress testing.
Yeah, in each condition, as you brought up before, based on customers' requirements and what they're doing, each one of these types makes a lot of sense, and I think this is a good one, a good summary of the different types. I'm sure there's different variations for different folks. Now let's kind of shift, because I know I'd like to get into a little bit more of some of the details of your learned lessons of how do you actually performance test? How do you go about a project when someone says, "Hey, we need to do this piece"? What's the first things you do? And maybe you can walk us through that, and we'll kind of get into some best practices of your experiences in performance testing.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I generally follow this approach. I gather requirements that based on those requirements, I prepare a plan. Meanwhile, by preparing a plan and while the review is happening, I select a tool, prepare the performance test script, and then the actual execution part of your performance testing comes up, wherein you have to run your test scripts and scale them if required, if required, yeah. And lastly, I used to do the analysis of whatever results have been captured and prepare a report and submit it to the concerned stakeholder. So this is the general approach that I follow. So first, just like any other testing aspect, the first step to start performance testing is to gather as much requirement details as possible. We don't want to, fumble in the dark without the requirements and failing in our ultimate goal of great performing system, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's why gathering performance testing requirement early on is, that's massively important. And performance testing requirements can be in lines of like number of users that we are planning to support. How many number of peak users if stress testing is need to be done, the expected response time that we are targeting, and the environment details. On which server we are going to run our test, like visit QA or staging or production or whatever. So yeah, so these are the requirements that I come to capture. And if I don't have these details, if I don't have these details, I uh, ask for these details explicitly if that is not captured in our NFR document. Yeah, and
Right. And
additionally I can list some requirements like we need to ask is there any business processes which are prone to like performance failures, or are there any pages which are expected to attract large number of users. And at this point, it is also prudent to ask for test data that you are expecting to use in your testing.
yeah, and so and I think that's an important part that you bring up in here is that part of requirements gathering is asking questions.
Yes, yes, that's
Getting
actually pretty much important. Yep.
so once you gather these requirements and you have all this information and you've built upon it, and what's the next step? How do you use that those requirements? What do you build from there?
So once I have all these requirements in place, I generally start preparing my performance test plan. And the performance test plan in which I include the details like performance testing objective, like our scope, then the requirements that we have captured till now. Then I also try to include the test schedule and how are we going to run our performance test, and pretty much everything that you can think of which would help you in performance test. So I try to capture all these details in my performance test plan. And I can also, add additional builds and results if I want to, like the entry and exit criteria, suspension, resumption criteria, the assumptions, risks that we may encounter while performance testing. And I try to include the deliverables that I'm going to deliver to my stakeholders so that they have an idea about, how the performance testing is done. And so, it's entirely up to us to prepare a test plan as per our requirement. And yeah, and also once we have prepared this document, I generally get it reviewed and approved by the clients and the stakeholders.
Makes sense. That's one of those things that love to be able to get a copy of that because that's I think a big part for folks is what does that test plan look like because it's an incredibly important part because now you've collected all this, you've asked all these questions from different stakeholders, from everyone from dev to the product owners, and you've captured it. And this plan becomes a way to communicate all that, a way by which to say this is how we're going to execute. So you set expectations for everybody because this is what we're going to do. But you also have all this data that's important that everybody agrees on. And so many times I've seen where you talk to a product manager and and you have to go beyond because their first answer to well, what do you want performance to be is fast. And so in your approach, I think you get down to more detailed level questions. And now you can share that with the team. And so they begin to see that and say, oh, they meant 300 milliseconds or they meant 10,000 concurrent users. So I think this plan becomes a critical piece. But obviously, once you have this plan, you have to begin actual testing. And so would love to hear about some of the tools that you've used, in any experience you have with those.
Oh yeah, so my suggestion to the folks would be to like while you are preparing and getting your test plan approved, You can simultaneously start looking for selecting an ideal tool for your performance testing. I mean, in this slide, I have mentioned few tools like JMeter, Gatling, Tsung, and HP Load Runner. And out of which three tools like Apache JMeter, Gatling, and Tsung are the open source ones, while the HP Load Runner is a proprietary tool. And so obviously the open source tools are free and they're pretty much flexible, scalable, and so yeah, you can uh, select these tools as per your requirements. But in my case, I mean, I've been using JMeter for my projects pretty much, and more often than not, I think it gets the job done for me. So I'm generally use the JMeter, and it was pretty good.
Yeah, and as Redline, we're big fans of both JMeter and Gatling, and seeing those communities do amazing things. They've been around. JMeter has been around for a very long time, and has grown. And with the 3.0 release and the great committers that are part of that team, we just keep seeing amazing stuff come from the JMeter community, and has kept up with commercial products, so to say, and excited for its future. Um, so now you built you go and you pick a tool and you build a test plan. How do you actually scale your tests, or what are your thoughts about what are you looking at even in the test? Maybe you can kind of jump into a little bit about running the test itself.
Oh, sure. So the after the tool selection part, I generally start preparing my performance test script. Sometimes it may be a bit early while my performance test plan is getting reviewed. But yeah, it entirely depends upon us to how start preparing our performance test. So while preparing the script, I generally try to make it as close to the real life scenarios as possible. Uh, for real life scenarios, the one example I can think of right now is about the think time. I mean, consider think time this way. Whenever a user uses an application, he or she will not go immediately to number of steps. I mean, he or she will not hammer the application in a way the tools does. So we need to make sure that the script behaves the same way the user is expected to behave. So for that, you know, so the user, I mean, he will wait for page to load. I mean, scroll the web page. Will probably skim through some content and then will decide to perform some action. So yeah, we need to configure our performance test scripts the same way. And at this juncture, I think another point which I can remember now is about assertions. I mean, you need to make sure that the response that you're getting as part of your performance test is, I mean, as expected. It shouldn't vary from what you are expecting. And for that, assertions are needed. So this is how you prepare your script. I mean, once your script is prepared, uh, I generally test it with some number of users, and just to test that it is working as expected, and will modify it if necessary. And then I can just start executing it on my application with a number of users to generate a load on application. And well, here's an important point to remember actually. And I mean, and since our goal is to simulate as close real life scenarios as possible, we should try to distribute the load to, I mean, different load generators. So just like the service that you have, Redline 30, which provides uh, the I mean, load generation part. So this is actually a good one. And because your users are distributed, one way is to use this is to use the cloud services like Redline 30. They provide us with an infrastructure to run our test for large number of users. And I mean, all I have to do is to upload my script there. Configure some parameters which I want and start generating load on the application. And on top of that, we get the useful reports. And which requires a lot of time to prepare otherwise. And while running our test, we should also keep tab on server resource consumption, which I think Redline 13 provides also. I mean, so the server resource consumption is important just so that we can have an idea about how server is behaving under load of a large number of users.
You
Yeah.
covered quite a few good points in there. You really did. I mean, I like the point about think time and the point of assertions. I think that's people should really understand that. So, as an example, it wasn't too long ago where somebody's performance test. They were running the performance test, and let's just say they were hitting 1.2 seconds, and all of a sudden the performance tests, the next one they ran, they were dropping down to like 200 milliseconds, and they thought, wow, we fixed our bottleneck. Well, in reality, something was generating an error and returning really fast, and they weren't checking at all the response, either the response code or the data that's coming back from the response to validate that their page was correct. So they were kind of fooled into having, oh wow, our performance has improved. In reality, it didn't. So assertions can save you a lot of time if you're not using them. They are important. Otherwise, it can lead to not knowing your results or making bad judgment on your results. So you had great stuff in there about resource monitoring resources, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more. And of course, always appreciate the mention of Redline, but scaling out the test was the key piece there. That you are simulating all those users, and you can't do that from one machine, so you have to scale that up. But now with all that, with running all that, you're collecting a lot of data. So tell us a little bit more how you analyze, what do you look for inside that data, and how you report that back to, so to say, the stakeholders.
Okay, so I mean, for me, the reporting part is the most important part of the entire performance testing lifecycle. So I mean, till now we have gathered the requirements, prepared test plan, executed our test scripts, and scaled them as required, run them. And now that we have a lot of data, we need to share them with our stakeholders. So what I do generally is, I keep the target audience in mind while preparing the report. For example, I mean, if you are reporting your findings to the CEO who is not much, well versed with technical details, so you should try to represent your findings visually. I mean, on the other hand, wherein you are reporting to a technical manager, so he would want to see the result report with a lot of technical details in order to dig deeper and to identify the performance bottlenecks. So my point here is to provide the analysis, keep the target audience in mind, provide the analysis. Like the analysis can be in terms of anything based on your observations, like such as while there are some 2,000 users load on server, resources usage has gone up, then error has been started coming after a certain amount of time, then response time has been increased, then previous test in this performance test. So these are the points that you can include in the report to make it more comprehensive for the audience to understand. And I generally, try to pinpoint the performance bottlenecks and will suggest the ways to mitigate them. I mean, this way, we can work in a team to reduce the performance issues. So and apart from that, if I found any error while performance testing, I report them with proper screenshots and the error details that I can capture. So I pretty much want to make my reporting comprehensive as possible.
Uh, Good stuff. So there's yeah, and there's so much within reporting, and so I think some of the things that I've seen to add into that are I think you had it looking at those bottlenecks, but I think part of this is, and you mentioned before this the server resources. There's so many pieces of this, and you talked about bringing it to the right audience, but and there's also reviewing it within the team and having this data. So I think you take your original test plan and all this analysis and data, and you really can come to the right decisions and the right analysis and the right conclusions for your performance testing. So this has been really a very good understanding from kind of end to end about your process. Maybe you can kind of recap with some of your best practices that you want, almost a bit of a summary on things you want folks to take away from this.
Okay, so I mean, for as far as the performance testing is concerned, I mean, as per me, the best practices would be to ensure that our performance results that we capture are relevant. I mean, for that to happen, we need the test environment. The environment that we are going to run our test on should be identical to the production environment, just so that we don't have any last-minute surprises in our performance issues. And I expect that the application to be functionally stable to start up my performance test. So this also helps in capturing the relevant performance results. And yeah, so while you are running your performance script, you can monitor your server resources consumption. So this actually helps in pinpointing the performance bottlenecks and yeah. So and last, I try to mimic the real world scenarios. I mean, without that, the performance test is nothing. And since the ultimately users are going to use it, so we need to be able to simulate those behaviors in our performance testing as closely as possible. So these are, I mean, some best practices that we can utilize to make our performance testing better.
That was great. I really, Marcy, wanted to thank you for going through this. I think it's a great start, both for the Redline 13 webinars, as well as just getting started with performance testing and giving some folks that basis. We do have a couple of questions. So from some of the folks, I'll read them. I think they're for you. So go to the one above. When we were talking about requirements, and I think you had gone through some of them, somebody asked, what kind of requirements will you try to get? And so can you talk a little bit more about maybe you talked about number of users. What are some of the other performance metrics that come out of your requirements gathering?
Okay, so obviously the number one requirement that I would like to have is the number of users that we are going to support, and for how many. So I mean the expected response time that I would want out of those many number of users. So two requirements. I mean the number of users that we are going to support and the expected response time. Then I try to capture if stress testing is required, and if yes, then for how many users. So that is one important requirement that I try to capture. And apart from that, there are certain requirements that if you feel like you can ask for, like the throughput details that you want. So you can ask for those. And apart from that, I can think of in terms of performance requirement is like what kind of errors that you are going to expect and what business processes or which pages you are expected to have a large number of users. So this actually helps in make your performance testing more simulating the real world scenario.
Very good. Another question. What are the parameters I have to observe in load and performance testing while running the scripts? So I think that's a great question of what do I actually need to look at when the test is running?
Oh yeah, so I use the JMeter tool, and it provides a lot of good listeners for the reporting part. So while test is running, I mean I try to run my test in the non-GUI mode. So once the test has completed, I get the result file and will immediately start looking for the average response time that my application is getting. So the average response time is one of the I mean, parameters that you can look forward to catching. And apart from that, if your client explicitly asks for it, then you can provide him the standard deviation, the error percentage, and the minimum and maximum time the request took to load. So these are the kind of parameters that you can look forward while preparing the report or doing the performance testing.
Cool. I think last question. So JMeter, how did you find out or learn about JMeter?
Okay, so I actually started working on JMeter in one of the projects. Like, I have to work on the performance testing, and in that company, we have been using the JMeter tool, and and I found it quite flexible enough for me to do my load testing. So I have been using this tool since then, and it's my favorite tool, honestly.
Mine too. Um, I agree. I've
Okay.
actually used it for probably 15 years. Um, really, Maharshi, want to thank you. Great session. Very good questions. Want to thank everybody in the community for attending, and we will make and we're learning as we do this. So a couple of pieces. One, we will make the content for this presentation and the recording available for anybody afterwards. Um, Two, any feedback would be extremely welcome. We want to know what other topics folks want. Feel free to put it in this chat. Feel free to email us. Or on this last contact info page, we put everything there for how to contact us. So any feedback, we want to keep doing this. We're not doing this as purely as a company webinar. We're really trying to go into performance testing. We're going to give you, as part of this, where we will have companies present real world use cases. We will have other folks, as well as hopefully have Maharshi back at some point, telling us what they're learning and what they're blogging about and their real projects. And then we'll deep dive like we did going into best practices from folks that are really in the field. So we will continue doing this and look forward to the community's feedback. Marshy, thank you so much. Testingdiaries.com is a great resource for folks. That's how we found you, is because I think I was looking up something. I think you had a great post on using JMeter in the cloud. I think it was one of the ones that always comes to my mind. And I know you've had other great posts on your site. Um, and uh, and I wish you continued success for that with that. And that's really it. Anything else you have, Marshy?
No. Thanks, Rach, for the appreciation, and that's it from my side.
All right, great. Well, we're signing off for webinar number one. Thanks, everybody, and look forward to the next one.